mushrooms are pretty cool. So, me and my friends are making a game about them. So, if you're new here, Spore Child is a mini mushroom-themed Metroidvania that I'm making along with the artist FartFish and audio wizard Line. They're pretty fun guys.
I get it!
Links to their stuff in the description, show them some love. Last video I asked you guys if the name Toadstool or Spore Child was better. It was close, but Spore Child just squeaked ahead both on the poll and comments of the video. But enough about last video, let's jump into what I did this video. First off, we're thinking about making the game commercially. Originally this game was going to be a 3-week project, and then we decided to make it a month or 2, but we've gotten really invested in this world and the game that we're building, and we kinda want to expand it. More on this later in the video. A majority of this project is planned out in this handy dandy Trello board. This week is dedicated to improving the environment and adding particles, so let's get started with that. The first thing that I did was implement particle effects. We already had a few for the spores, but we were going to need more. I also wanted to improve the spore particles anyway. Speaking of, this is what they look like now. Do you prefer the old or new version? Let me know in the comments below. The next particle I wanted to add was a bit of an explosion when the player or enemies get hit. I struggled getting this to look how I wanted, and it still doesn't look quite right to me, but we can always tweak it. I probably need to tweak this next particle as well. I added some floating dust particles to the background. I think they look okay, but I think they could be better with a custom texture. But once the particles were in, I started implementing post-processing effects. I really only added a vignette and a bit of bloom because I felt that was all that would really fit in with the game. I think it looks pretty good.
Wow!
Next up, I created this custom texture to try out for the particles. What do you think? Any tips on how I might improve? Other than that, I got to making more particle effects for player movement, including jumping, landing, and walking.
Yeah, boy.
It was around this point that we started discussing the possibility of making and releasing this game commercially. As I said before, this project was planned to have a month or 2 long development time. If we were to make this game commercially, then the production value and scope would go up quite a bit, and the development time would probably extend to around 3 to 9 months. There'd be more settings like keybinds, performance, localization options, as well as just general better polish. In terms of scope, we'd probably keep the 3 areas but make them bigger than originally planned, as well as more populated and polished, obviously. Essentially, if we went with the commercial route, the game would be generally better in exchange for a longer development time. So I ask you, dear viewer, to keep this in mind while watching the video, and comment if you would be interested in purchasing a full, more polished version of the game. And as a reward for keeping that in mind, and for you to get a better sense of what the game might be like, there's a demo of the game available to play now in the description. Play it, give us your feedback, and let us know if you want a paid 2 to 12 hour version of the game, or if you just want a free, small 10 to 30 minute experience. Anyway, back to development. I next got started on adding some background music that Line made and fixed a bug to do with the player respawning at checkpoints. After that, I made a tutorial level that would teach the player basically how everything worked with the keybinds that they need to press. The keybinds aren't in yet since I don't have the art for them, but you should be able to see them by the end of the video. Next, I decided to work on the menu to procrastinate from doing scene transitions. FartFish drafted this up, Line added details to it, and after a few slight tweaks and expansions by yours truly, this is what the menu screen looks like. Still waiting on the title and button art at the moment. Well, I had nothing else to procrastinate with, so I got started on the room transitions. It was actually quite easier than I expected it to be. Basically, each time the player collides with one of the exits, it gets the room and entrance that the player is meant to be transported to, and then, well, transports them there. For the last week of development before this video came out, FartFish was busy remaking his game for Cool Math Games, so Line and I had to pick up doing some artwork. Line ended up doing the background and environmental pieces, while I did the UI and character art. I made these dioramas in Sprite for the credits, which is a technique I stole, took inspiration from Orange Pixel, who is a fellow game dev here on YouTube. There's a link to his channel in the description. I also tried multiple times to make a good logo, but none of them really felt right to us, so we put it off for another time. I implemented the backgrounds that Line made into the game and then gave them a little bit of a parallax effect. I think they look great, but I feel like all of this blue kind of makes things meld together and doesn't really provide a whole lot of visual clarity. Not only does it cause the game to not look as good as it could, but the lack of visual clarity can cause players to miss jumps that they normally make, get hit by characters they weren't aware of, run into camouflage spikes, and other things that'll just generally frustrate the player, which is definitely not what we want.
That's some bullshit.
It's definitely something that we'll have to look into in the future. To procrastinate, again, from implementing player death, I worked on the menu, again, and implemented this free-to-use font called KongText. There's a link to this in the description as well if you're interested. I made the words light up when they're hovered over and made the buttons functional. After that, I implemented the environmental art that was made mostly by FartFish and a bit by Line, and the game looks a lot less empty now. I only had 2 things left that needed to be done before the demo, and those were player death and level design. I designed one of the rooms that we would be using for the demo before I got started on player death and respawning. Essentially, this works nearly identical to how the room transitions work. However, instead of the object just knowing which entrance to take the player to, when the player passes one of these respawn anchors, the player stores what room it's in and the position of it, and then transports them there when their HP reaches 0. A lot of things in this demo aren't flashy or final, but I think that they're enough to have a fun experience with and let us know what kind of experience you want. The game really has come a long way in the month and a half that we've been working on it. If you have any suggestions, then leave them in the comments below or join my Discord where a bunch of us hang out. Don't forget to play the demo and let us know if you want this game as a 10 to 30 minute free experience or a 2 to 12 hour commercial game. But yeah, that's it. Bye!